Well, good morning, Queensland. Well, today, of course, is very exciting news, and as Premier of our great state of Queensland, I'm very pleased to hear that the International Olympic Committee has moved us towards targeted dialogue. It's not Parliament yet. We're very excited by this development. It puts Queensland in the box seat, and I know that every level of government is absolutely united in working together to make this happen. And I'm very pleased that we'll be working with the mayors and the federal government to ensure that we get the funding to make this a reality. We already have 85% of the venues at the moment. It's a new norm, which means it's a game changer. We don't have to build huge stadiums that are not going to be used in the future. And this gives us hope and opportunity as we go through our economic recovery and plan for the future. It gives every single one of us hope that it puts Brisbane firmly on that international map, and we can actually give hope to our young students right across the nation that they could compete in an Olympics here in Queensland in 2032. I'll hand over to John. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Premier. Good morning, everyone. I think we can be very, very pleased with last night's announcement. As you know, we've been moved to the status of preferred candidate. We're the preferred candidature. We're the only one. The other cities that had shown interest, that had presented, they've been parked for future games. It is a significant recognition of the way we've worked together, the three levels of government, the Paralympic Committee and the Australian Olympic Committee, in presenting this bid together. And I think that was recognised as well. It was a long night. The meeting itself started at 9:30. They got me to leave the meeting at about 11:30. It kept me waiting for 2 hours. So the discussion on this subject was 2 hours. But such is the importance of it. And I think that it was a very mature decision by the IOC. To take a decision when you've still got a few other cities there and say, well, we're going to go into targeted dialogue with one preferred city, was a big call by them, but that's where they ended up. And I think you will have seen the press release that's come out from President Bark, and it was very, very positive, and we can take a lot of encouragement from it. Thank you.
Look, it might be a miserable day there in terms of the weather, but it is a beautiful Brisbane day, a beautiful Queensland day today, and there's so much to be excited about today. I can't wipe the smile off my face. I'm feeling the love of all three levels of government working together on the common aim of having the Olympics here in 2032. We are now in the box seat. This is a really exciting opportunity. Now we need to actually go through and make sure we lock in the plans for improved infrastructure. We have 85 to 90% of the venues in place, or opportunity for temporary venues, but this is the best opportunity that our city, our region and our state has had in generations. We can't let this go to waste. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, John, if we could ask you some clarity on what this actually means. We've got the Olympics, haven't we, and everything but name and announcement?
No, we have to. The IOC will now deal exclusively with us while we complete the questionnaire. Now, they've seen most of the information in the various feasibilities that have been submitted to them. The federal government has to provide its undertakings in terms of security, things it's done for any international event that comes here, border control, all of those things. So there's work to be done in that area, and we've got a reasonable period to do that. Then, when that's done to their satisfaction, when the Premier, the state of Queensland and the federal government have come to whatever arrangements outside the games they need to come to and say we're ready to go, then we say that to the IOC, and that can then go as a recommendation to the IOC full membership, the session, and there has to be a vote. Even if there's only one candidate, you have to get 50% plus one. So I'm hoping, I'm planning that we will conclude the requirements that we have to fulfil, the state, city, Paralympic Committee, Australian Olympic Committee, and that'll all be done end of April, early May, we could, on that basis, go to a vote in Tokyo.
I heard this morning that they could hold a vote as early as the next IOC session just before the Tokyo Games.
That's the one.
How likely is it that we could get the Games?
That really, if that is put to a vote, we've got to get 50%, and I think I can get those numbers.
Another question I saw this morning, the IOC has said that as part of our bid, our initial bid, that we put forward a venue master plan. Where is the state?
We put forward an indication, a draft plan. In many cases, there were alternate sites still to be ratified, and for example, there's nothing definite on where the rowing is going to go. At the moment, what we've done for the track and field is Carrara. It's existing. The IOC is happy with that if that's the fallback. If that was the case, then we do a ceremony in Suncorp. The IOC is not requiring us to go out and spend big money. They want us to use existing and temporary venues. So that's what that refers to.
Given the announcement overnight, what would be the only thing that stops or prevents Brisbane from getting the game?
Well, we have to fulfil the documentation, answer the questionnaire, and then the three levels of government have to fill. They've got to be at one in terms of the funding, not for the games, but the funding that this region requires to properly host the games as a region. The future infrastructure and transport, in particular, rail and road.
Premier, obviously beautiful weather.
No one's going to rain on this parade today, can I say that?
Obviously, we've heard that these being in summer games, we will actually hold them potentially in winter though, in July.
It's absolutely perfect weather for the games in 2032, and that's something that the IOC, I think, will look very favourably upon.
Venue master plan, do you have any hopes to build a new venue, or do you want to rebuild Wollongabba?
Well, we'll be looking at all of those in detail now, but there is an option of one new big venue in terms of where we would have the opening ceremony, but we may use Carrara as well. But let's have those discussions. We've got to now go down to the fine print and make sure we've got all the funding lined up between all levels of government. And I'm sure there is an absolute willingness in my conversations with the Prime Minister. It's been very, very positive. We have a senior minister that's on our task force as well. And I know the councils are up for it as well.
Where are we at in terms of dollars from the federal government? Have you got an idea of what you would need from them?
We're commencing those negotiations now. Yep, so that's the next stage. Yeah.
John, you mentioned April, May, that sort of time frame to have our documents all online. At that point, would you have a better understanding of where all the venues?
We don't need to. I chair the Tokyo Committee. After they were awarded the games, we found $2.3 billion of savings by moving to existing venues, not building new ones. There's still, this 11 years out, the IOC is flexible. There were only recently changes for Paris for 2024. There's plenty of time on those things. It's basically, though, we have to, the IOC wants to know that it's existing or temporary or planned for the future growth of this region. And just so it's understood, the funding about which I've just spoken, the Premier's spoken, that's not the operational costs of the Games. The Games break even. The IOC, on a budget of circa 4.5 billion Australian, the IOC is putting in 2.5 billion. That's give or take the exchange rate. They're putting 1.7 billion US into Los Angeles, and we've been assured at least the same. Then you get your approximately $1 billion from national sponsorship and $1 billion from the ticketing, and that's got a large contingency in there. That's enough then to pay for both the Olympics and the Paralympic Games without any call on the state or federal or local governments.
The Premier rightfully sort of put a pause to any Olympic planning about a year ago because of COVID. Is that 12 months hinder at all the plans, or in some ways did Queensland and Australia's response to COVID help in terms of the IOC?
While it was parked by the levels of government for very obvious and correct reasons, we continued, the AOC, in discussing with the international federations and the International Paralympic Committee how they best saw this proposal. The time wasn't wasted.
Did Australia's COVID response help, you think?
Yes, it did. When the Premier made her presentation, along with the rest of us, to the Future Host Commission on the 8th of February, she talked about the resilience of Queensland, its ability to handle floods and to handle bushfires. It's not at this time of year, we had to make that clear, but also the outstanding record of this state and Australia on the COVID response.
John, off the back of that though, is it really fair to be making, the IOC to be making a decision as monumental as this, narrowing down the field to just one, knocking out those other candidates, when to be fair, those other candidates would have been looking at other priorities in their countries right now, i.e. fighting the pandemic rather than building Olympic facilities?
We didn't just start looking at this 1 year before, and the other countries didn't start looking 1 year before. This started in 2015 when we were looking at Los Angeles. Los Angeles was awarded the Games in 2017, therefore it opened up for a later period. And the IOC's position on not keeping all the cities going is because they don't want to have costly, big losses for many cities. You know, go back to Melbourne and Sydney, we spent $30 million on that. And each of those, put that into current dollars, when President Bark met with Prime Minister Morrison, the Prime Minister said, look, we'll put $10 million into the bid, and the Bark said, save your money. I want you to do this for less. You don't have any more to bring the IOC members here. You don't have to visit them. You have very limited number of presentations, less now even because of the COVID. But it's what do you want to do? Keep them all going with the greatest of respect and have them running up, the meter running. And at the end of the day, the IOC's made the call that this is the best opportunity.
Premier, what does this mean for regional Queensland? Are we going to see water polo being played in Mount Isa?
We want to include the regions as well. So, of course, with the football, we've been looking at having the soccer matches, of course, up around the different regions. And, of course, all of the state will share in an Olympic glory. So we want to make sure this is inclusive of Queensland and that we all have a part of history here. And look, to have Queensland and Brisbane firmly on the international map, I think what that will do for our tourism in the future, especially when the international borders by 2032 will definitely be open by then.
Will the Games be called Brisbane 2032 or Queensland?
We're working through that at the moment with the IOC.
Do you hope to be Premier in 2032?
Hey, one step at a time.
Just a question from New South Wales. They're saying you're happy to rip up a $30 million bill for quarantine but fund an Olympic Games. How do you respond to that?
Olympics are for all of Australia. Just like we celebrated an Olympics in Sydney, it'd be wonderful to celebrate an Olympics right here in Queensland. And I hope people in New South Wales will come here too.
Tony, just on something else.
No, we're doing Olympics.
How wide will that Southeast Queensland bubble? I know Geelong was interested.
Sorry?
How wide will that Southeast Queensland bubble be for planning? Geelong was interested. Any idea of where some of the other...
Yeah, well, I might get Mark to talk about that in terms of from the Council of Mayors perspective, but there's opportunities for Ipswich, for Logan, Redlands, Brisbane, and of course the Gold Coast. And in fact, it was the fact that we held such a highly successful Commonwealth Games that everyone started to talk after the 2018 Commonwealth Games about the potential of an Olympics because it was done so spectacularly.
Will Queensland be opening the border to Melbourne?
I'll have more to say about that in the House.
We're out front of the Paralympics.
Yes.
Yeah, not that it gets forgotten, but it's important, I guess, to know that this is a huge fill for Paralympians around Australia. What does it mean for those up-and-coming athletes and the organisation as a whole?
Well, a 10-year runway provides a fantastic development path for so many athletes, so many young athletes. One of the key goals here is accessibility to sport. So where we've got 5 million people with disability, 75% of which say access to sport is an issue. What better way to kick-start a change there than an announcement that gives us 11 years to make serious, significant change every year, not just in 2032.
Just a question for John, if we can. Just on Tokyo, of course, that's next. Are you confident that our athletes will be safe?
Absolutely. The athletes will only go there 5 days before. They will leave when their competition is over. They will be tested before they leave. tested on arrival, tested every 4 days. They will only be in the Olympic Village and their venue. They won't be going downtown. Well, I'm working on something even stricter for the media. And Chris, but we have to make the Olympic Village and the venues the safest place in Tokyo, and that's what we're doing. We would last week we had 4 days of operational planning. We're down now to looking at the seating on the buses to make sure there's the correct distancing. Well, that's all very well. We suddenly need double the fleet of buses, and there's a lot of buses involved. A decision on all of the accredited people and all of those who bought tickets in Japan will certainly be there. A final decision will be taken by the Japanese government. It's governments that decide these things on what's safe, and a bit later, probably March, April, and a decision on what venue capacity we're going to have.
And what about vaccinations for athletes?
Not compulsory, we can't do that. Some parts of the world, religion, legally, but it's certainly being encouraged, and the IOC has an agreement with COVAX where it's helping to facilitate the distribution of vaccines. We are expecting that the latest that our team will be vaccinated in June.
How crucial is that fast rail? We've heard a lot of talk about it over the last 2 years. Is it likely to be built? You were talking about rail infrastructure happening.
That's a matter that is outside the little mind of an Olympic official, and the others can talk about that.
Thank you. Look, the Council of Mayors started this journey almost 6 years ago, in March of 2015. Our objective then was to bring forward critical infrastructure for South East Queensland. By 2032, there'll be another 1 million people moving to South East Queensland, probably more. We need to work with all levels of government to ensure the great legacy that is left after the Games is a fantastic transportation system around South East Queensland. And that's what the mayors have been dedicated to from day one, and we remain dedicated to that cause. Because that is a legacy that our citizens will really appreciate in the future.
And how much is fast rail a part of that?
Oh, I think fast rail is a very important part of that. Moving people around will be critical, and that includes rail and roads and active transportation as well. And for South East Queensland to have that post 2032 will be a great outcome.
No doubt all the mayors around South East will be keen to have some sort of event or Olympic involvement. Unrealistic, so how do you deal with the expectations of everyone?
Look, the mayors, to their credit, and that includes the new mayors that have come on board since the last election, have been committed for the greater good around South East Queensland, recognising that growth and that councils are going to have to deal with and manage that growth. Yes, it's not possible for everybody to have events. However, there's a whole range of training opportunities. The focus that will be on the area around the world will benefit all of the regions, and indeed the entire state will benefit, and that's great for Queensland and also great for Australia.
What sort of economic modelling have you done?
Around what?
Around the Olympics 2032.
Well, the modelling obviously has been provided in quite some detail. The IOC have done the AOC and the IOC have done great work in terms of demonstrating how the games can be cost neutral. But what's important for us obviously is trying to bring forward infrastructure that is going to be arriving at the same time as an extra 1 million people in South East Queensland.
How much in money terms do you think that's going to cost?
Oh well, that's to be determined.
That's economic modelling.
Well, and largely the development of that transportation is going to be worked through with local councils, the state government, and the federal government.
Premier, can I ask? It's a stunning achievement by your big committee to get this result today. But when we look at what's happened, Brisbane has gone forward as the sole surviving candidate here. The other 6-7 cities have fallen away. You're not worried that they know something you don't. Are you absolutely confident this is the right path to be taking and that it won't lead to severe financial difficulties?
Yeah, well, don't forget that there are Olympics going to be held in other countries around the world. We're looking here at 2032. And what we are very focused on as a state government is our rolling pipeline of infrastructure. So we've got like a $56 billion infrastructure pipeline over the next 4 years. So we can very easily put in place with the federal government our rolling infrastructure to cater for what is needed. And look at some of the common purpose infrastructure that we created for the Commonwealth Games. For example, the sporting complexes that are now used by all the schools and all the community, and they're packed. So if we can have a legacy after this that benefits everyone, I think it's going to hold the state in a really good position.
Premier, do you think you can get the government...
When you officially announced you were going to go for this, did you talk about putting together a committee, and particularly someone to head that committee? Where's that at?
We have a task force at the moment with representatives of council, state and federal, and the Prime Minister has put on that his federal sports minister.
We need to set up, I think, a separate sort of corporation or separate entity to look.
That'll happen down the track, yeah.
Premier, do you think
How much money do you need from the federal government to make
We're
this
working through all those financial arrangements now, but everybody, it'll have to be all worked out, and those financial discussions will happen.
Premier, do you think you can use the Olympics to convince the federal government to drop its requirement for privatisations to fund infrastructure in Queensland?
Oh, well, we're not selling our assets. We're building assets.
So can you use that as an argument with this federal government to drop that requirement, which has deprived Queenslanders of funding for infrastructure?
I think what we have seen in recent months is an appetite for the federal government to invest. We've had very good discussions with them on roads announcements, coming to the party on our priorities for Queensland, and a very good working relationship with the Deputy Prime Minister, Michael McCormack.
Thank you. We've got to go.
Okay, thanks everyone.